Drama has always been a part of the Love and Hip Hop Atlanta set. Even the most seasoned cast members, however, were rendered dumbfounded by what recently transpired. According to production-related sources, Rasheeda left the set in tears following Karlie Red's unexpected private revelation. They pieced together hints from the most recent trailer and behind-the-scenes rumors. Fans are already giddy. However, what specifically did Karlie say that made Rasheeda feel so uneasy? Did it have anything to do with the long-running gossip regarding Kirk's covert life? Or did Karlie say something really unexpected that took everyone by surprise? This emotional bombshell was dumped in the middle of filming just when spectators assumed the tension would subside after weeks of mounting. The few who were fortunate enough to be on site reported the atmosphere as being in utter quiet. Rasheeda stood up, her microphone still in place, and she left the room while clearly wiping her face. Additionally, several cast members stood motionless, uncertain of what to do next, while others attempted to console her. The spectacle was no longer merely for the cameras. This actually happened. We're going to explain exactly what caused this momentous occasion and why fans are raving about it, so stay tuned. Even before the cameras started rolling that day, there was a distinct vibe on the set as soon as Rasheeda entered, but it was sensed by the whole production crew. There was a lack of the typical lighthearted banter, informal side chats, and little jokes among the cast. Rather, there was silence. Silent movements, silent looks. Everyone seemed tense, as though they all knew something was about to happen but were afraid to express it out. Rasheeda arrived on set sporting her trademark self-assured hairstyle. Although her outfit was well-tailored, her eyes conveyed a different message if you looked closely. They were less intelligent than normal. She had a harder time smiling. She kept looking around as if she was trying to find someone or something. Didn't know if she wanted to watch. For this scene, the producers had prepared a tiny lounge area. It's just a round table, 3 chairs, and some dim lighting, nothing fancy. Bambi and Karlie Red were already sitting and awaiting Rasheeda. With their hands clasped and their eyes down, they both appeared solemn. This isn't about lighthearted banter or casual catch-ups, according to the body language. Rasheeda greeted him politely as she sat down, but it was obvious that she wasn't feeling too chatty. She spoke in a tight, controlled voice. She looked straight at Karlie and asked, "So, what's this about?"
For a time.
Karlie took a while to respond. Rather, her jaw tensed as she looked at Bambi and then back at Rasheeda. She wasn't like that. Typical sloppy energy. This was more purposeful and heavier. Bambi was the first to speak. "Look, Rasheeda, there are certain things, but we're not trying to ambush you or anything. Some things you should be aware of." Rasheeda's eyes squinted a bit. "What sort of things?" There was a pause once more. Everyone holds their breath during that type of pause. The people behind the cameras hardly moved at all. Karlie finally leaned forward a little, quieter than normal. Her voice was serene. "It concerns Kirk." The room was completely transformed by just 3 words. Rasheeda's entire face changed. Her eyes slightly darkened and her jaw tightened. With a cold voice, she questioned, "What about him?" Karlie took out a tiny folder from the shelf next to her chair. It was only large enough to accommodate a few sheets of paper and was neither thick nor large, but it felt incredibly heavy. Karlie said, "I wasn't sure if I should say anything." However, she shoved the folder across the table to Rasdofter. Everything that had been happening, saying, "I can't keep this to myself anymore." As Rasheeda took it up, the camera focused on her hands. Her countenance was blank, yet her finger was steady. The problem with true hurt is that it doesn't necessarily manifest as yelling or sobbing. Sometimes there's nothing but quiet. There was too much silence, so I slowly opened the folder. The flight schedule was on the first page. Rasheeda couldn't recall any dates of travel associated with Kirk's name. Hotel reservations were displayed on the second page. Kirk's name, the dates, and the city are all the same. However, The third page was the most impactful. A fuzzy picture that seemed like it was taken from a distance. Kirk was standing beside a woman, not kissing or holding hands, but close enough that it didn't appear to be a chance encounter. Everything was captured on camera. Rasheeda's expression tightens. She moved the page back and forth, gazing again and again, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes blinking a little more quickly. Once more, as if she had misinterpreted it the first time. Karlie's voice was steady as she spoke again. Bringing this to you was not something I wanted to do. I couldn't sit on it any longer, though, after everything we've gone through. Bambi whispered. We're just showing you this because we care, Rasheeda. The truth is something you deserve to know. Rasheeda, however, was not listening. She continued to stare at the folder. She appeared to be holding herself together with sheer willpower, as seen by the tenseness in her entire body. After what seemed like an eternity, she finally put the folder down on the table and carefully closed it. On top of it, her hands were folded, fingers interlaced. Her voice was keen but hushed when she talked. Karlie, how long have you been putting this off? Karlie took a deep breath. Some time. Why now? Rasheeda inquired. There was a slight crack in her voice. Why are you showing me this now in front of the cameras? Karlie cast a downward glance, says I wasn't sure whether it was my place before, but after witnessing everything that was happening, I couldn't contain myself any longer. Rasheeda closed her eyes for a moment as if to calm herself, and exhaled slowly through her nose. Then she got to her feet. Bambi did not move to stop her, but she did stand as well. Karlie didn't either. They merely observed Rasheeda silently, pushing back her chair, acquired the folder and carried it as if it were 100 pounds. The words "I can't do this right now" were spoken quietly by Rasheeda. On the final phrase, her voice broke. I really can't. Shortly after, she abruptly turned and left the table. As she passed the production team in the lounge, the cameras followed. She continued to record every breath with her microphone. Rasheeda made minor noises, such as gentle sniffles and footsteps that reverberated in the silent hallway, but she said very little. She stopped just when she got to the door and swiftly used the back of her hand to wipe her face. She then opened it and went outdoors. Just a quick return to the table without any fanfare or emotional farewell. Karlie and Bambi sat silently. Bambi ran her hand through her hair and sighed slowly. I didn't want today to go like this. Karlie, she mumbled without saying anything. She continued to stare at the door where Rasheeda had just vanished. She paused for a long moment before speaking. The words, "Maybe it was never going to be easy," were spoken softly by Karlie. A few seconds later, the crew turned off the cameras, but the tension in the room persisted. But at least now she knows. Everyone moved gently and more slowly. No one wished to break the stillness first. Rasheeda was standing on the sidewalk outside, still holding the folder. She didn't answer. When her phone buzzed in her pocket, it was most likely Kirk calling. She simply remained there, gazing up at the sky while squinting at the tears that would not stop no matter how hard she tried to suppress them. As word of what had transpired began to circulate among the cast and crew, everyone realized that this was no mere hip-hop and love moment. This was real. This was profound. And things would never be the same again. Rasheeda was holding the folder more tightly than she likely imagined as she stood outside the stage. Every second that went by made the air around her feel thicker. Not a single camera was present. The production had decided not to film past that door because the crew was following her. However, phones continued to record remotely. Background workers, helpers, and even uninvited bystanders captured hazy footage, showing her using the back of her hand to wipe her face, while standing motionless as if she was unsure whether to move or just collapse there. Inside, the others remained seated in startled silence. Karlie was still sitting there. Bambi had discreetly moved aside, holding a phone, but even she wasn't acting like herself. For once, there were no side remarks or whispered jokes. Everyone understood that this was too serious to be treated like a scenario from another episode. In a quiet nook, the production crew debated whether to check on Rasheeda or give her some room. In the end, they agreed to leave her alone for the time being. At the same time, Atlanta was already hearing about what had just happened. Bloggers began publishing ambiguous tweets and Instagram stories. After being informed earlier in the day that a significant scene was being recorded, although names had not yet been revealed, everyone who followed they already had theories about the show. Fans were right when they began writing things like, "I bet this has something to do with Kirk and Rasheeda again." Rasheeda eventually stirred. As the sun began to set, she took out her phone and placed a single, silent call. Not to production, not to Kirk. She gave Spice a call. Spice responded almost instantly. "Hey, Rasheeda, how are you?" Rasheeda was silent for a long moment. Then, her voice raspy and low came over the line. "You must come fetch me." 20 minutes later, Spice arrived in her vehicle. No cameras, no more personnel. She is alone. Rasheeda remained silent as she went into the passenger seat. She simply gave the folder to Spice while gazing out the window. Slowly, Spice opened it and turned each page one at a time. The airline receipts, the hotel reservations, and the grainy picture. Spice's jaw clenched. "Oh no." "Hiya," Rasheeda said in a bland tone. "Are you certain this is real?" Spice asked thoughtfully. She was aware of the dangers of making assumptions, not because she didn't think Karlie was trustworthy. Slowly, Rasheeda shook her head. "I'm not sure anymore." Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. Spice drove them away from the set, leaving only the soft hum of the car's motor. Returning to the lounge, Karlie at last rose from her seat. She wasn't the kind to remain motionless for very long. She couldn't sit and wait for someone else to make the decision, no matter how heavy things seemed right now. She ventured outside, but not very far, simply leaned with their phone against the building's side. Bambi joined her a minute later. Bambi said, "You all right?" in a quieter tone than usual.
Arrow.
AE gave a shrug. "I'm not sure. I assumed that talking to her would cheer me up, but it doesn't." Karlie gave a dry laugh. "Perhaps?" Bambi nodded slowly. "Sometimes the truth doesn't feel good, even when it's the right thing." The two of them stood silently as the final crew members packed up equipment and gear. Production was officially closed for the night, meaning that no more filming would take place today. Meanwhile, social media was blazing. Fans had noticed the change in energy even without all the details. A few behind-the-scenes videos had leaked, but not enough to reveal Rasheeda's face. Sirius had fallen, began trending, and within hours, #LHHATL and #PrayFor RASHEDA both appeared. One blogger shared a mysterious story that read, "Karlie just turned the entire season upside down. You guys aren't prepared." That same night, Kirk posted an Instagram story. It wasn't a video or a photo, just a black screen with a single line of text. Sometimes silence is important. As the hours stretched into late night, neither Kirk nor Rasha responded to the barrage of comments from fans who demanded answers and asked what he meant. Some pleaded with him to make a statement, while others dragged him mercilessly, calling him out for years of alleged lies finally coming to light. Spice and Rasheeda ended up back at Spice's place, with no cameras, no crew, just two friends sitting in the living room with soft music playing in the background. "You want to talk about it?" Spice asked gently as she handed Rasheeda a glass of water. "You know what's crazy?" said Rasheeda in a low voice. "This isn't even about the cheating anymore. It's about the lies. All these years, thinking I knew what was real." She shook her head. "Not yet." She sat there for a long time, folders still in her lap as if she couldn't let them go. "It's like, how many times did I defend him?" Rasheeda went on, her voice cracking slightly. "How many times did I tell people it was different behind closed doors? Spice leaned forward, her tone firm but kind. You don't have to blame yourself for trusting somebody you love. Rasheeda let out a hollow laugh. Feels stupid now. Back at production. Headquarters, the team was already holding emergency meetings. Outside, the city lights glowed. In the middle of the meeting, one producer said, "This isn't just another fight we can edit down. This is bigger. This is personal." The rest of the team nodded in agreement. But by the following morning, things had gotten even worse when one of Kirk's former business partners leaked an anonymous statement to a gossip website, claiming that Kirk had been running games for years behind the guise of fictitious business trips. Once more, there was no hard evidence, just rumors, but at this point, rumors were sufficient and fans believed what they wanted to believe. And at the moment, the majority of them believed KL. Rasheeda finally made up her mind as the morning sun rose over Atlanta, calling production herself and saying, "I'm ready to talk." They promptly set up a private, cast-free confessional shoot. There was no glam team or entourage when she arrived. It was just Rasheeda, a producer, and a single camera. She sat down quietly, took a deep breath, and looked into the camera. "I don't know what y'all want me to say," she said, "because, right now, I'm still figuring it out myself." She was wearing a plain shirt and jeans, with no makeup other than a little gloss. She refrained from crying on camera. She spoke in the same calm, steady tone without raising her voice. The conversation continued after she leaned back in her chair, folded her hands in her lap, and waited for the cameras to cut. "I'm not perfect. I never claimed to be, but I always kept it real." She let the silence go on for a long moment. "So now I have to figure out what's real, right? And what's not. It's one thing when strangers share personal details about your life, but it's quite different when it's people you trust and are close to you." Producers hurried to clear a private confessional room as soon as Rasheeda's text hit production. But this time, there were no interruptions, no background crew, just Rasheeda, a camera operator, and the director. Rasheeda arrived quickly, dressed casually, no heels, just sneakers, and was ready to say what needed to be said when the cameras began to roll. Her voice was steady, showing none of the chaos underneath, and she took a deep breath. She said, "I know you've all been waiting for me to react, but I wanted to do it right. I've been quiet too long." Fans would comment on how composed she sounded, despite the fact that her eyes darkened with pain. "Karlie laid those papers out in front of me," Rasheeda continued, looking down at her hands resting in her lap. "This season has always been about showing the world who we are, our successes, our families, and our struggles. But nobody ever showed what happens when trust breaks." My heart went to my throat, and for a moment I was unable to breathe. There was a muffled sound as she drew. In a shaky breath, "I left the set because I needed space, not because I wanted to flee from the truth, but because I needed to face it alone. Bookings with names that weren't mine. Okay? And that picture of him with a woman I'd never met. Okay?" She closed her eyes for a moment as if she could feel that betrayal burning anew. I felt everything freeze. She glanced back at the lens. "I've spent years defending Kirk, telling people we were unbreakable, telling myself he loved me, he respected me, and he'd never hurt me like that. But the folder said otherwise." Rasheeda paused again, her voice catching. "Behind the scenes, no one understood why I did it. They thought I was being dramatic, but trust me, this wasn't drama, it was life." "What happens now?" she asked in a quiet, rhetorical tone. "Do we pick up the pieces and pretend nothing happened? Or do we let the truth guide the next step?" The room was silent, with no word from the crew. I didn't just lose faith in him. I lost faith in my own judgment. That admission hit like a punch. And fans would later highlight it as the moment she stopped playing the reality star and started being a real person. "I'm here to say I'm choosing myself now," Rasheeda continued, her voice stronger. "I'm choosing honesty even when it hurts, because that's the only way forward." With those words, she reached forward and gently pushed an envelope toward the camera, which fans would later learn contained her own compiled evidence texts where Kirk had said, He loved another woman in a voicemail she'd found but never played. This was her counterpoint to Karlie's folder, and she admitted, I was holding on to this too. But it wasn't until Karlie showed me something that I realized I had my own receipts. The camera cut, but Rasheeda didn't get up right away. She sat there for a moment, eyes closed, as if mentally preparing herself for whatever came next. Outside the confessional production, not quite knowing how to proceed, they just captured their strongest cast member admitting her own truths in a way nobody expected. It wasn't just a single storyline anymore. It was a tangled web of betrayals, half-truths, and emotional wreckage. Everyone on set knew that this moment had changed everything. Reality TV moments were frequently shot in confessional rooms, but they rarely felt this raw. The plan was to let them talk it out face to face, but by now everyone knew that talk wasn't like any other. It would be an emotional reckoning. Rasheeda returned to a group scene, this time with Karlie and Mimi. Rasheeda walked in first, without looking at Karlie, and simply sat down, folded her hands, and looked straight ahead. Karlie followed, carrying a small bag, and her posture was composed and controlled. She paused when she saw Rasheeda, then sat down opposite her. Mimi sat awkwardly between them, adjusting her microphone and clearing her throat. I know this is hard, she said gently, but perhaps it's time to listen to each other. Rasheeda nodded slightly before turning to face Karlie. You went through my personal life, she said in a low voice, and Karlie met her gaze in front of everyone. I did, and I'm sorry you had to find out like that. I thought maybe you already knew, Karlie went on, but I realized you didn't, and I couldn't keep it from you. Rasheeda laughed bitterly. You couldn't keep it from me, but he could. Kirk sat with those lies right next to me. That was the first time Karlie sounded remorseful. It wasn't the defensive energy fans had seen when rumors first started. Mimi watched both women with pain on their faces, and she said softly, we all share the blame. We let things simmer too long. We pointed fingers, made excuses. Rasheeda leaned forward, tears welling. Again, but she blinked them back. So what now? That's not on me, Karlie said. Should we just bring him back in and hope for the best? She inquired. The door opened before Karlie could respond, and Kirk entered as expected. Everyone froze, and he glanced at Rasheeda and then at Karlie. He didn't say anything, just that tense moment. Rashed got up and almost fell on her chair. She said, Kirk, in a trembling voice, and returned. Kirk swallowed, his voice quiet. I had to. The producer signaled to roll the cameras. The camera zoomed in on Kirk's face as he stepped toward. Rasheeda, I know I hurt you, he said in a raw voice. And I'm sorry more than you can imagine, Rasheeda's shoulders drooped, and he started crying. I was afraid, he said. I fear losing you. I'm afraid of losing my reputation. It persisted even after I blocked it out. Rasheeda's eyes were shiny and red when she looked up. Hers were. So you let it fester. Room held its breath and said, you allowed it to spread like a cancer. Cry turned away and glanced at Bambi, who nodded slightly. There was an underlying camaraderie between them despite all of the stress. I'm sorry, Kirk said. Rasheeda took a trembling breath and said, I can't change the past, but I can show you I've changed. I'm trying. She wiped her tears and turned away. Her words, trying isn't enough. Not when you've built your life on lies once more. Kirk and Karlie were left alone in the middle area when she left. Kirk leaned against the couch and dropped on his knees. Karlie placed her hand on his back as she stood behind him. Mimi gave the cut signal. No one moved, but the camera stopped. There was too much tension in the air. Too uncooked. A private meeting with senior producers was held later that evening. They went over the day's video. Rasheeda's breakdown, Kirk's admission, and Karlie's unwavering stare. They argued over whether to cut it down or air it exactly as is. Some claimed it was the most interesting plot ever depicted in a motion picture. Others were concerned that it was too painful and intimate. Rasheeda, meanwhile, went back to her house. She was still holding the folder tightly. She placed everything on the coffee table as she entered her living room, including the hotel reservations, messages, and receipts. As though attempting to make sense of everything, she sat down and went over each piece of evidence once more. Outside of the show, she later texted her closest pals to beg for advice. Some advised her to permanently leave Kirk. Others cautioned her, bringing to mind the years they had spent building together. However, Rasheeda was aware that she alone made the choice. Filming resumed with a smaller scene the following day. Sitting in a circle, Bambi, Spice, and Mimi discussed what they had seen. Just their responses, not Kirk's nor Rasheeda's. Spix. Tone faltered. "Oh, I've seen a lot. Rasheeda has never looked like that to me. She has always been the rock, but she appeared so tiny and disoriented." Bambi wiped away her own tears and nodded. Karlie is correct. Truth can sometimes pierce deeper than lies. But this is what we did to her. We ought to have spoken up sooner. Mimi let out a sigh. Judging from the sidelines is simple. However, I'm not sure if any of us could manage it if we were in her position. Producers took notes while they talked. They were aware that viewers were drawn to this unvarnished, unadulterated honesty. They include their responses in the next episode. Hey, sandwiching it between Kirk's request for forgiveness and Rasheeda's confession. Kirk came back to set that afternoon for another one-on-one, this time with Mimi. The air was heavy when they sat down, but Kirk appeared more stable. When he said, "I'm here to answer questions," Mimi whispered softly, "Any questions? How do you want people to remember you? As the person who lied or as someone who admitted it?" Looking into the camera, Kirk hesitated. "I want to be known as someone who has the guts to own up to his faults, even though I can't make everything better." Many viewers who watched it again online found that admission to be poignant. While some social media users criticized Kirk for being too little, too late, others commended him for taking the initiative. The set was buzzing with excitement by the time Rasheeda came back for the week's last group scene. Everyone was curious about her appearance, words, and whether she would even show up. She went directly to Kirk as soon as she was inside. She was not surrounded by cameras. Two persons who had endured hell stood face to face for a brief moment without any applause. She gazed at him, then he looked at the folder he was holding. Karlie had shown her the identical one a few days prior. "I have witnessed all of her silent words. I also pardon you, partially, ... I don't forgive the lies he told. I forgive the man I know. He told lies." Kirk's gaze grew softer. "I'm grateful," he muttered. She gave one nod. Together, truth and trust must be restored. You must live it every day if you desire that. After saying that, they all sat down at the table where Mimi and Karlie were waiting, three of them in a circle while the cameras were rolling. There was a glimmer of optimism outside, but the air was still thick. Fans saw teasers for the next episode, which focused on new rumors, Rasheeda's pardon, and Kirk's ability to become a global sensation. That moment felt like a turning point, a genuine, earnest move toward healing, forgiveness, and perhaps even a fresh start, even if the season was far from done. What do you believe will happen to this power couple after witnessing Rasheeda's unfiltered breakdown and Kirk's heartfelt confessions? Is this the quiet before a storm? Or will Rasheeda's partial forgiveness result in actual change? What about Karlie? Did her audacious move merely exacerbate the scars? Or did it eventually lead to the open discussions that everyone needed? Tell us what you think. Do you think Kirk and Rasheeda can regain trust? Or is their relationship irreparable? When Karlie originally placed those receipts on the table, did you support her, or do you believe she went too far? Tell us where you stand and share your ideas in the comments section below. Are you cheering for Kirk's redemption story, Rasheeda's new beginning, or just the raw drama? Please give us a thumbs up and show your support if this episode kept You riveted to the screen. Remember to subscribe to Love and Hip Hop Atlanta Season 13 so you don't miss a single twist. From here, it will only grow more intense. To remain informed about every confession, every revelation, and every unanticipated turn. Trust us. We're just getting started and you won't want to blink.